Hey everyone, welcome back to the Inland Empire Coaches Talk. Today I have the pleasure of having our fearless leader and commissioner, Mr. Rob Wigod. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for inviting me, and nice to be with you.
So obviously you guys finally put out the roadmap for all of the teams in Southern California. And now that we've herded the cats and given them a date, it's kind of turned into a now what. So what are you hearing from the athletic directors, the coaches, the fans, the community, now that the announcement has been made?
We've had very good feedback and a lot of positive feedback. There have been people that may have had ideas that we were going to cancel sports seasons altogether or cancel particular sports. We were maybe going to be in a position where the regular seasons were cut dramatically 30, 40%. Maybe we would only have league champions advancing to the playoffs because they would be, cut down and so forth. And so I think when we did release the 2 seasons of sport, kept the regular seasons pretty much to 90 to 100% of what they normally would be. The same number of allowable contest maximums was unchanged. Same amount of divisions, same amount of champions, and our section championship stayed the same. I think we got a lot of people who were very, very pleased to see that we were going to try our very best to make this happen for the student athletes. Now, having said that, certainly there were things that we could have done in a different format or a different way, but people had concerns about that, understandably. But I honestly could say a week later now, the reaction has been far more positive than not. And I really hope it's because maybe some words were heeded in that us as the adults, the athletic directors, the coaches, all of us here in our office, it's really our job to come through and deliver for these student athletes. And the focus going forward needs to be to make this happen. And the negativity the student athletes have experienced and all the things they've had to deal with over the last several months that have taken away what they love to do. Now we have a roadmap for them. And I'm hoping that our adults always keep that in mind and we put aside any of the potential issues and challenges that we know are not going to be easy to overcome, but we need to overcome them. And we need to do that with the idea of the student athletes first. And I believe that that's been a prevalent thought throughout the last week or so.
Absolutely. I mean, I posted on Twitter a few days ago that adversity breaks some men and helps some men break barriers. So it's like you look at this, and I applaud you guys for having the vision to try to keep 100% to 90% of the season. Because I work with obviously a lot of universities as well, and we know JC is 70% of the season. That's right. Step one. That's before we even go to any contingency plans, because none of us know what this is going to look like in November and December. So I applaud you guys on that. Can you talk a little bit about the decision to take 3 seasons and bring them down to 2? You touched on it briefly during your press conference, but can you break that down a little bit more for us?
Sure, and I appreciate your kind words about what we were able to come through with. And we had talked about 3 seasons of sport virtually from the beginning of the process, back in April when we had to shut down spring sports. And we had some thoughts about how that would be possible. But by the time we got to late June, early July, we saw such a change and such a dramatic shift in terms of what was happening here in California, and then specifically Southern California. So the reality of getting anything out in the traditional fall window just didn't seem like it was going to be possible. So at that point, we sort of shifted into doing 2 seasons. If we had stayed with 3 seasons, then we would have had to cut regular seasons quite a bit, maybe 30% or so, just to help with the overlap between 3 seasons. But once we were able to shift that into 2 seasons, then we could keep regular seasons fairly intact. What the result of that, though, is, of course, especially in the spring, is what I've been calling the stacking of sports. We have a lot of sports in the spring and some sports that aren't used to being in the same season. But it really came down to the basketball, wrestling, soccer, girls water polo. Those, the fewest number of sports we had were in the winter season. And we basically had to move those to the spring, with the exception of girls water polo that went into the fall. And to do that, we could make the 2-season model happen and keep those regular seasons fairly intact. Because again, the student athletes and coaches, everybody's working so hard. You want to try to give them as much of the opportunity as they can get. And to cut their seasons dramatically like that, 30%, 40%, that's a tough thing for the student athletes and coaches who still work as hard as they're always going to work. and to see those opportunities reduced so much. So I'm pleased that we were able to do what we could with the regular season and the 2-season model.
Perfect. So I applaud you again for your continued optimism and leadership in this, because you get people into a room, and of course you're going to have people, oh, well, now I have to coach the men's and the women's at the same time. How are football guys going to work in January? This is not, they're not used to this cold. I'm from Michigan. It's going, no, you'll be fine. But that's just me. So, and also obviously there's a lot of turnover right now with coaches, ADs going to different programs. We were talking off air that I have 9 new ADs just in my region. So what words of wisdom or encouragement would you give to ADs and programs right now? Because obviously you have a much larger scope and network than any one AD in this state does.
Well, our message is really the same message we talked about a week ago, and that is to try to put the student athletes first. And while we know that they're faced with a tremendous amount of challenges, they've got facilities issues, they've got coaches issues, they've got multi-sport athlete issues. They have so many things that they have to navigate through here going forward. We want to know from them what we can do to help and support them, and we want to help and support them. There's 4 assistant commissioners here in the office, along with myself. We're former athletic directors, and we hope that they see us as resources that can try to help them. And if you truly put the student athletes first and you keep in mind what this is for and who it's for, then I know that that's something that can keep us in the right direction. And I'm very encouraged by what I've heard already, that so many of our schools and leagues have been meeting just within the day after the announcement last Monday, and already getting started on these schedules. And I've seen lots of different suggestions on how to maximize the use of facilities, how the coaches can structure the practices and games. I mean, we've heard certain sports that have never been in the same season together, like a boys and girls water polo, boys and girls volleyball coming up. You know, we're hearing stories about that the boys and girls programs will bond like they've never bonded before, because they're looking at doing double headers at let's say the varsity level in one site, and then they would play double headers, boys and girls, for the lower levels in another site, and maximize the use of officials, maximize the use of the facilities, and have the boys there for the girls team and the girls team there for the boys team, and kind of a new environment and things like that. So I've read a lot of nice things said by coaches and things that they're trying to do to really make this a positive experience for the student athletes. And that's where it has to be. And that's where our focus is, to make sure we do everything we can as the adults to deliver for them and to come through for them. They're depending on us. They depend on us to make this happen for them. And I believe we can do it. And it's going to take a lot of work to do it, but I believe we can. And then the plan is to hopefully get this done and look back and say, look what we achieved. Look what we were able to do in this very difficult environment and experience that we've been going through. But we actually did it. And because of the dedication of our adults and our student athletes and everybody trying to work together, we actually achieved something that many people thought would not be possible. So that's a motivator. That's got to inspire people. That's got to get people knowing what's at stake, and what a great opportunity we have to teach the young people that we can come through for them.
Absolutely. And I know you talked about stacking and doing double headers and some of the creative ways that athletic directors are looking at working together right now. As a Division I baseball official, as an assigner, the number one thing I think I got from guys was, how is this going to work? Because a lot of my guys, they work football, they work basketball, they work baseball all at the same time.
Right.
We're all in different seasons. So has there been talk about stacking officials? So working with Alan Hollisey and making sure that you could work a baseball game at 3:15 at King High School and then work a 6 o'clock basketball game with that same official.
Yeah, exactly. And there's been a lot of good dialogue about how to try to make that work. And I'll be interested tomorrow. I mentioned to you before that I'll be on a call tomorrow with the Citrus Belt Area Athletic Directors Association. And I've been on all their calls since we shut down. And I love staying in touch with that group and the other groups that we work with. And I'll be very curious to hear some more from some of them as to what plans they've been making and how they're trying to juggle this. I heard from an athletic director in the area the other day. For baseball and softball, they've planned to play 3 rounds like they always have, 6-team league. They're going to play 1 game on a Tuesday, and they're going to play double headers on Saturday. So they're going to do that for 5 straight weeks. That will give every team in the league their 15 league games. They're going to leave Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday alone So there should be plenty of officials available, hopefully, for them. And like I said, it's just another example of how this can work. I mean, I was a baseball coach for many, many years before I came here. And if that was our schedule with the game on Tuesday and a doubleheader on Saturday, we'd have been fine with that. That would have been, in this environment, in this particular instance, we would have been fine with that. So as I said, there are ideas out there, and there's going to need to be sharing of these officials as well as facilities and coaches. And I just have to have faith in the athletic directors and coaches that if they truly put the students first and trying to do what they can for them, then they'll make this work. That's the bottom line. We have to make it work.
Absolutely. And I would also state that the athletic directors and the schools should reach out to their community. If you have somebody, we were already in an officials crisis in this state. We need more, I say young, but new officials to come up through the system right now. And
Yes.
no better time than now to put that foot forward. You think you can call a ball on a strike? Come on down.
You're absolutely right. And it's everybody's job. You're so right about our shortage right now across a lot of sports and across our section. And I say this all the time. And if every school in our section could identify one recent graduate, young man, young woman, who just graduated, maybe is attending junior college or four-year college in the mornings, and they get one student from their school, that's 500 plus new officials, young officials like you mentioned. Just one. So, it's everyone's job. I know our officials groups are out there recruiting, and they try very hard to get new people involved. But I really believe our schools have a tremendous responsibility to help out, because they are the ones in contact with these students. And what better job, a lower level baseball or softball game where you might make $70 for a 2-hour game at $35 an hour. What job is a college student going to find at $35 an hour?
That's basically how I started.
Well, and they can do that 2 or 3 days a week or even more. Go to school in the morning, go out and do a freshman baseball, softball game in the afternoon. They're going to make good money. They're not going to be out in front of 4,000 people screaming and yelling at them. There'll be people screaming and yelling at them. But it won't be what they might expect it's going to be, is thrown into this pit. They'll be out there, and I think we need them. And so if they love sports, and they're not playing maybe anymore after they left high school, we really need our athletic directors and coaches to encourage these recent graduates to get into officiating. Dennis Pratt well. All they need to do, give Dennis Pratt that name and a phone number, and he will take it from there and get them to the right association, the right sport for them. And look what we could do. 500 new officials if we just get one from every school.
I would take it a step further. One of the things that they did at my local high school was you had to have a certain amount of hours of credit, so community service credit or work service credit, in order to graduate. Well, you could take a senior who played football but doesn't play baseball, and he could now become an official at the youth leagues, because we know there's still going to be youth leagues going on, which now might open up the availability for somebody who is a CIF official. So it's not just the adults we're talking to. You could get community service credit. You can get a job right now working with perfect game, going and calling balls and strikes at 16, 17, 18, if you're not, and open up the door for the more officials on that side as well.
It's a great idea. I mean, again, and then I would think, hopefully, if the high school student enjoys it enough, then we hopefully transition them into when they've graduated to get involved with high school officiating too.
Absolutely. So you and I both being baseball guys, we've been watching Major League Baseball now that it started. And the coaches and the officials have to wear masks. Is that something that the CIF has looked at mandating, since National Federation hasn't come out with a guideline with it yet, where you could have a mask that would have like the CIF logo on it, or a sports buff or something to that effect?
Well, the mandates and guidelines, recommendations for all of this that go on beyond just masks and wearing of masks is really done by the health professionals, and that's not us. And so we're not the ones that really would be involved in any kind of direct mandate or providing that kind of an order that everyone would have to follow. And then if they didn't, there would be some kind of enforcement arm as part of it. So we certainly have tried to help out as a resource. Our CIF Sports Medicine Advisory Committee did publish guidelines for returning to play, returning to training, and so forth. But in terms of actually mandating a piece of equipment to be worn in a game, unless that came through the National Federation of High School Rule Books, which govern all of our playing rules, that won't be something that comes directly from the CIF. If students, coaches, umpires all want to wear those, certainly it would be their choice to do it, but I'm not sure that we would be mandating anything from our office. We wouldn't be, would have to come from somewhere else, health professional, local, state, county health departments.
Okay. How do you see the shortened window? Because I was talking to one coach. I asked all my coaches, hey, if you have any questions for him, he's going to be on the program. He goes, do you see the shorter window affecting the physicality for student athletes? So example, football, usually they would have basketball as that buffer to let the body recoup before going into a baseball season and the grind of that, or the arm position. Do you see any sort of buildup, or if you have a kid that's playing basketball and baseball at the same time while doing wrestling and football, has there been any talk about that and supporting those athletes?
Well, there's two aspects of this. The first one, I think what we've tried to do is actually help the student athletes with as much of a normal lead up or preparation to their season. What we were seeing in June and July were efforts to try to get students back out there in these limited groups of 10, one coach at one area of the field, and then having another group of 10 other students with a different coach at another part of the field, nobody passing the ball back and forth, no one being able to touch the same equipment, those kinds of things, which were such a stretch from that kind of activity into an actual practice or even a game. I mean, my goodness, that's a big difference from what they were trying to start to do. So our thought here was that by pushing back to mid-December and beyond, then we have the months of August, September, October, November to hopefully, as things improve and students can get back out there, that they'll have more of a normal lead up and a preparation, weight training, conditioning. They can play off-season games. They can do all kinds of different tournaments if they wanted to in the off season in those months, and really start to get a normal kind of preparation. The other point you made is, yes, we could be in situations where a basketball player and a baseball player are actually now trying to play in the same season. That's going to be a big challenge. It's not something that anybody's really used to or familiar with. But again, trying to count on and depend on our adults, coaches specifically, and student athletes to make sure the academics are still taken care of first and have the time to do that, both mentally and physically, that it doesn't take too much of a toll. There just has to be some smart decisions made as to how that student athlete's time is budgeted. You know, we have an 18-hour maximum number of hours each week in the high school season. So if a student plays basketball, they have 18 hours a week as a maximum. If they play basketball and baseball, it's still 18 hours. So they would it wouldn't be any more particular hours that they would have to devote, but they'd have to be smarter in how those 18 hours were managed. And that's where coaches and student athletes and families all have to be working together. So again, these are young people who hopefully have enough time in the next few months to get themselves in proper condition if they're going to try to plan to do something like that. I mean, the basketball, baseball person or basketball, and for girls, basketball, softball, they're not going to need to do any conditioning for baseball or softball. They'll be in shape. So they don't have to go to baseball and softball practice and run and do certain things that those young people are doing to stay in condition. They'll be in condition. So now it's about working on the baseball and softball skills when they're out there at that time. So as I said, there's ways to navigate through it. It's going to take some creativity and some flexibility and some dedication. But again, I hope we are going to encourage student athletes who want to try to do this to see if they can make it happen, because they want to do it. And hopefully us adults can do everything we can to make sure that they can.
Absolutely. And I think the main thing in all of this is continually having that hope, because right now you can look on social media or turn on the news and people don't want to give hope, when I believe that sports is Teflon in galvanizing communities and bringing them together. So I applaud your office again on what you guys are trying to create. Are you at liberty to talk a little bit about some of the contingency plans and when those might be rolling out?
Sure. I think that the way this would roll out is, right now we have the calendar in place, and that's the calendar. I know a few people have said, well, would it change, or you have any adjustments made? And we were very firm on something that I thought was very important, and that is that if we were going to announce last Monday that we couldn't go forward with our traditional fall calendar that was in place and ready to go, that we didn't say we can't do the fall calendar and we'll be back in touch in about 6 weeks. my thing was, no, we need to make sure that we can announce the calendar that will be in place if we can't go forward with the one that everybody was planning on. And so that being said, we now fast forward to December. Let's say that we're not able to go right away. Well, we can still push probably into January. Those games that were scheduled in December by girls and boys volleyball, water polo boys and girls, those would have to be canceled. But they could perhaps pick up their schedules in January. The football acclimatization, it would start in January. So they would play the games later in the month of January and probably lose those first 2 or 3 games that they had scheduled. But we could still stay on track for viable league play, which is really the key in this whole thing. If we have viable league play, then we can go on with section championships and everything that goes with it. But if we don't and don't have time for the viable league play to happen, then obviously we run into a position where it may not be able to be supported. So as I said, that decision probably wouldn't have to be made until maybe the middle of January, maybe a little bit later, where if we just ran out of time and couldn't have viable league play. At that point, then we would have to move ahead. Take a look at the spring season, which would start early March. Same idea, get to early March, see where we are. If we're still not ready, we push maybe into the middle of March, into the first part of April, again, to that point where viable league play, if it can't be done, then we'd have to take those sports off the board. So the idea here is that sports stay alive. I mean, they will stay alive in the fall season for at least the month of January, close to the month of January. If not that, we're still alive, I think, until we get to the early part of April. But at that point, again, with factors beyond our control, we're in control of what we can. These other factors, obviously, of controlling this pandemic and getting to a point where we could actually implement these calendars, those are out of our hands in one respect, but then they are, because we need to do our part. Everybody needs to do their part. If they really want high school sports to return, then we all need to do what they're telling us to do. And then we get another chance at putting this thing better in terms of under control for us to allow student athletes to go back out there. So that's how I see it. That's how I see it. There's a long time ahead of us, and hopefully that's time that can work for us and to get this thing better controlled so that we can start to see this activity happen.
Oh yeah, I mean, and you can go on Twitter right now and you'll see 20 ads for put a mask on if you want to put a helmet on in January. How much are you guys watching the northern section of CIF? Since obviously they pivoted a little bit from y'all.
Well, I mean, they did what they felt was in their best interest, and I can understand that. I mean, you look at a map of California and you see some of the counties in the very far north of our state. They haven't had one death. They have had very few cases, if any. I think there's just one county in the far east and northern part of our section or our state that hasn't had one case or one death. So they're smaller schools. I think they have 73 schools in the northern section. Many of them are small in small towns, and the numbers just aren't the same as they are in Southern California. So their leadership believed it was possible that they would try to go ahead with the traditional fall calendar. We've noticed just in the last week since that announcement, their larger schools, they don't have that many of them. Their larger schools have already said that they're going to, in football and volleyball, align with the CIF seasons. So the larger schools that they have, and in those sports, my understanding is that they are not going to play in the fall. They're going to play the CIF seasons that we've published. The smaller schools, again, may still hold on to doing it in the fall. It may suit them better. We certainly hope it does work out for them. We're in the business of having student athletes participate. So that's the best way for them, especially with the multi-sport issues that small schools face. And it allows them more time for their multi-sport athletes over 3 seasons. Then good for them if it can work. They would probably be with the CIF seasons in the spring with those sports. Maybe not with basketball or wrestling. Maybe they would do it differently and have those in traditional winter timeframes. But certainly their spring sports would line up with us anyway. It would just be a matter of what fall sports and or winter sports that might take place in the northern section in a traditional normal kind of calendar.
Absolutely. Obviously, we have a lot of parents that also watch this, and there's been a lot of speculation when it comes to, we talked a little bit about the multi-sport athletes, but what about the parents that are talking about, oh, I'm going to transfer here, I'm going to send my son to my ex-husband who lives in Colorado, they're open. Can you speak to a little bit of the transfer rules so that way it's on the record, like this we're not changing this when it comes to CIF?
Right. Well, our transfer rules are intact as they are. They're put in place by our member schools, not by me or anybody else who works for the CIF Southern section of the CIF. So the rules that we have are there because of our member schools and what our member schools want. We have made a significant change in one respect to transfer rules, and that's the financial hardship waiver, which facing what we know are real scenarios where students and families cannot afford continue in private schools or maybe even in the public school district that they're in. So we do now have a process for a waiver due to financial hardship, which would mean that there wouldn't be any limitation on eligibility in the new school. But the other aspects of our transfer rule remain. I have heard, as you stated, there are parents who think that there might be a better situation in another state, and they want to take their student athlete to another state and have them play at a different time of year. Just everybody needs to be aware that you get one season of sport in a school year. So a student who decides to leave California and go play in the fall, let's say in a different state, and then wants to come back and play the same sport here in our sports calendar in 2020, 2021, they won't be allowed to do that because they will have already played that season of sport through in this school year. So I hope people who decide to do that are aware they don't get two bites of the apple. They get one season of sport in a particular school year. So I can't put my hat on as a parent of the students who decide to do this. That's going to be their decision. And if they believe that's in the best interest of their student to do that, then that's what they're going to do. But I'm not really, our focus is here on our student athletes and our sports calendars and what we're offering in terms of opportunities. So that's really where we're going to be focused. And those who decide not to be part of it, well, again, they're going to be their decision. And I don't think we're going to be lacking for student athletes and teams and things going forward. I think we'll be just fine.
Absolutely. I think everyone's going to be chomping at the bit to get back and to bring spirit back to the campuses. One of the other questions that I've got a lot was, okay, what about the parents that want to stay home? So obviously we're all starting in the home model versus homeschool, hybrid versus back on campus. Does the CIF have a stance on that and what is allowed versus what's not allowed for the students?
Yes. If the students remain enrolled in their high schools and receive their education through online or distance learning, they would still be eligible for those high schools as long as they're full-time students at the high schools they attend. How the education is delivered is not a factor in their eligibility for that school. So in the models that we hear about, at one time we heard a lot about on campus and online. There would be some kind of mixing or hybrid models and half the time at the campus and maybe half the time not. Those would all still keep students eligible as full-time students at those high schools. The only issue for those kinds of virtual programs is if the student disenrolls from their high school. If there's a online program, a virtual program where they would no longer be full-time students at the high school, then that's a different scenario. We do have a multi-school agreement bylaw that students who attend schools that are not members of the Southern section or the CIF, there is a way for them to affiliate with those member schools and have eligibility with the member school. But again, that's a different process for approval if they are not enrolled in their comprehensive high school. So we've heard about both models, and it would just be up to that school district, private school, whichever kind of model that they're adopting. But if, again, they just provide an online option for students and they stay enrolled as full-time students, then their eligibility is not affected.
Absolutely. Perfect. So last question, I always ask this to all my coaches, but for you, what words of advice or inspiration would you give the community right now?
I would say stay the course, have faith in what we're trying to do, be supportive of what we're trying to do, because if you're thinking about student athletes, that's got to be primary in your thoughts and all of our thoughts. And with all the negativity that has gone around and the student athletes have had to deal with, I hope we've provided the roadmap going forward to give something to point to be thinking about and planning for, preparing for, so that we can get back to what we all love to do and what we love to watch the student athletes do. So there is time. Time can work for us. We have to be smart in how we utilize the time we have ahead of us and do the best that we can so that whatever happens down the road, we can always say to ourselves that we did our very best, because that's all we can ever ask. It's all we can ever ask of our student athletes. It's It's all we can ever ask of our athletic directors and coaches and principals and everybody involved, is that we did the very best that we could to try to make this work. And I hope that's the attitude that we all have going forward. And none of us can predict the future. We all don't know what it's going to look like on December 1st. But I sure hope on July 28th, with some time ahead of us, that we can keep focused on what's planned and what can be done if we all just get together on it and make it happen.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being on the program. I hope that your wife and daughter are safe. I hope everyone else out there is safe. If anyone would like to be on the program, please get in contact with us. Past that, God bless. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate being with you. Same to you. Be well and safe with your family.
Thank you so much.
Okay.